There's a particular phenomenon that happens when you're traveling a lot, and if you have content that you watch or Google for or whatever in multiple languages, and have IP addresses from several locations on this planet, that your algorithm kind of like gets a little confused once in a while. Um, you know that the information that you get is limited by the certain kind of connections that you have, what kind of, well, but language by itself, right? So let's just say you want to find out what's happening in China. Chances are you will have to resolve to secondhand sources that are maybe in the United States or elsewhere in the West, and talk about certain things that are happening in China. You will not consume Chinese mainstream media. You will not consume what people exchange about it in social media. You will not watch any kind of alternative sources coming from China, or people close enough to China. You will probably watch something in English that is gone through several iterations of the telephone game before you hear something about it. It's a big problem in how we deal with communication in general. And this effect is enlarged by not your personal barriers of language and how you search for things and so on, but also by very practical things of how, for example, something like YouTube will present you something. So, if you're somebody who grew up in Germany like me and think, hey, I have this weird thing in my mind of a song that was pretty popular 20 years ago, and you start to put it into YouTube, you would get things that you did not expect. In my case, that is normally reaction videos from people that sit in Great Britain or in the States or wherever, and basically talk about certain kind of things. And this is true for various artists, but there's always waves. So what I stumbled upon is that 5 or 6 months ago, this song, Herbert Groenemeyer der Weg, was all of a sudden reviewed by a shit ton of reaction video content creators, if that is a profession or niche or whatever. Um, and normally, from some kind of German viewership that would, float that and so on. But what's really interesting is that this doesn't happen like in a silo, where you say like, okay, this one content creator does this, and then maybe a year later this other content creator does it, but it goes in particular kind of waves. This is I noticed that with several things. So when it comes out new, then it makes a little bit more sense, right? So with Rammstein Deutschland, that was a little bit bigger because it was actually released and had a lot of international recognition. But then there's stuff like this, right? Which is like, okay, this is a relatively old song. I mean, relative. I mean, we're talking about this millennium, but I mean, it's quite surprising that all of a sudden, English-speaking content creators would be interested in this. Maybe it is because, you know, you probably know this tipping point theory that, if enough people basically float something and all of a sudden, everybody's talking about it, but it doesn't really matter. What concerns me as a native German speaker is something completely different. It is the problem that so much is lost in translation. And what people react to if they are confronted with an artist like Herbert Grönemeyer, who is first and foremost a poet and then a musician, even though he always expressed himself through music. But the point is that the precision that the subtitles that they're all commenting on react on is basically, well, let's just say instead of giving a comment on any particular kind of interpretation or whatever, what I want to do is something completely else. I want to try to at least make you aware of some of the gaps that a translation of German to English generally has. The expression lost in translation, it has very good reasons to be used and to exist. And the I want to make you basically introduce people that are actually interested in something like this, to maybe entice you to either dig a little deeper or at least get you beyond that surface scratch. Because what you see is that people react pretty emotionally to it, right? So normally what the people know is this is a song about his wife who has died of, I think it was breast cancer. It's definitely gut cancer. And this is one of his ways of mourning, I guess. And I want to jump into it and basically just show you, because I'm interested in language and the concepts generally, where he kind of like, where the translation wasn't able to capture what he's actually saying, okay? And try to, again, I will not be able to actually translate it completely with all the nuances, but at least get you to the point where you understand why it's a little bit more complicated than just translating one language to the other. If you're a follower of my channel, sorry, I still code, everything is fine. I just am also a human, and this is one of those things that interests me. It is somewhat connected because how big data works and how the internet is fed with information and how it's consumed is interesting. But to be honest, this is more that it bothers me how people would basically, I don't want to say judge, because I mean they're all positive, but digest something and think that that provides the full brevity of what's actually said, right? So let's jump into it.
Ich kann nicht mehr sehen, trau nicht mehr meinen Augen.
Okay. That's actually pretty cool that we're going to start with something super simple, because that's in an English-speaking world, that's a known concept, right? Like, you don't see me for who I am. It's obviously not a visual kind of seeing, right? So that's pretty okay. The inaccuracies already start though. Trau nicht mehr meinen Augen. So trauen basically is to trust and not believe. But that's in that case a nuance I could live with.
Kann kaum noch glauben, Gefühle haben sich gedreht. Ich bin viel zu träge, aufzugeben.
Okay, this is funny because specifically this line was every creator that I saw who went into this liked this line, and the point is, like, it's way better. There's so much more, right? So what he says in German is bin viel zu träge, right? Not faul. So I'm going to show you something, right? So this was translated as lazy, right? So if I say faul, then you see the translation is lazy, right? But that's not what he says. He says träge, which is, hey, oops, sorry. It's a different word. You can see lazy shows up here, and sluggish is, kind of related. But this one is a little bit more interesting what we see here. Why? Well, because it's not that kind of laziness. So if I say Trägheit, then the translation would be inertia, right? And that is more what actually is how it's expressed, right? So ich bin viel zu träge, aufzugeben. So I'm too lazy to give up is not the kind of laziness that so you understand laziness as something like, oh, I would need energy in order to do something, right? But Trägheit, or momentum, if you want so, is something that is maintaining something that could be moving. So if you roll a bowling ball or whatever, then there's energy required to actually slow it down or stop the bowling ball, right? And he uses that word to express that that's actually how he feels, right? So he's in motion. His life is things are happening, right? And he would need energy to actually just give up, right? It would be hard because he's already just doing anything. Like you would actively have to stop. And that's the emphasis that he chooses here. And he likes to play with those kind. We're going to go into way more interesting things, but he basically mixes those. He does it a lot of times, where he basically works on multiple levels. So he uses a physical expression to give you this idea of using it in an emotional way, right?
Sehr auch zu früh, weil immer was geht.
That's what he references here, right? So, weil immer was geht sounds to a German speaker at a first glance very colloquial, right? So it's a little bit, hey, what's going on today? So he says like, yeah, there's always something that, yeah, or something always works out. That's fine. But because there's always something going on, right? So he cannot give up, right? As I said before, because there's always something going on, and you have not the possibility, or you would actually need to actively break out of that before you could even give up. So he doesn't have that possibility to give up. He's not too lazy in the sense of that he's just passive. It's more that he doesn't have the energy to pursue. Well, let's see how dark it gets, right? I don't want to have an interpretation here, but let's see.
Wir waren verschworen, und füreinander gestorben.
Okay, this is just a translation that I would say is as good as it can be, right? It's correct. Like the translation throughout is normally correct for the most part. It's more that, okay, so wir waren verschworen, that's a word that is the same. It's actually to conspire, right? We conspired. Now that has a negative connotation in English, and the interesting thing is in German, not necessarily, right? So here it's not understood as negative. Wir waren verschworen auf alle Gezeiten. It's not negative. It's you have to look at concepts in German are often a little bit freer in the get-go, and then you specify it down, right? So if we think ethics, so let's say you have a company and you hire your own child, for a summer job and so on. And everybody would say like, yeah, why not? Why wouldn't you? Right? That's fine, right? But then you have a word like nepotism where it's like, oh, okay, so eventually apparently this becomes bad, right? Depending on the scale of the position, who else had to be pushed away for it, and so on, right? So it's a scale of is it harmless? Is it even positive, or can it even become a problem? And that's a little bit how Germans would understand this expression, right? So coercion, no, not coercion, sorry. To conspire is not always something that is so dramatic, right? It's we conspire together. It also has the positive aspect of okay, you stick together, against everybody else and the kind of stuff, right? That's the word he uses here, but it has a very different level, obviously, if that's the word you use to express what you're expressing.
Und füreinander gestorben, haben den Regen gewogen, uns Vertrauen geliehen.
Okay, this is beautiful and will be hard to explain. Now let's start with under level 1, okay? So gebogen is not necessary. Okay, so I would say bent, right? I'm going to show you something here as well. So the actual word in its thing is biegen, right? To bend. German works a lot with transitive and intransitive, or in other words, something is either a state or something is happening, right? It's just changing, positioning, whatever. So when I make from biegen, I say gebogen, so I put this E in front of it, then it grammatically changes a little bit. Then it becomes bent, right? See that? So that would be the right kind of word for gebogen here, not bowed, but bent. And then what does it mean with rain, right? This is an interesting point. So let's just type what he said, right? So rain bent. So we, there was a we in front of it that kind of overjumped us. So we bent the rain, right? Which is, okay, probably means nothing to you. But here comes the interesting part. So, right, this is the grammatical part of it. And it sounds weird, gebogen, because this is what would that even mean, right? So what they actually did, and this is right, is if a German speaker hears this, then so this kind of like, I don't want to say it falls out if you listen to it, but because you hear it, but you understand it more as something that was ripped apart and could maybe fit together, right? So let's see what would happen if that were the case. And as you can see, then all of a sudden it becomes the rainbow. And this is what the German speaker would hear, right? Wenn Regen gebogen, then there's no native German speaker that wouldn't think of a rainbow at that moment. And that's basically what he's actually saying here, right? So their togetherness or relationship or whatever was using the rain, right, to create a spectrum of light into all those different colors, right? So it's an interesting imagery, and he does it purely by playing with German grammar, and very, very accessible to Germans, but obviously impossible to translate, because yes, this is kind of what he said, but obviously not, carries almost no meaning for you, I guess. Also interesting, right? So trust is already soft, right? So trust is not knowing, right? This is already the case. So you need just like double down on something. So lend each other trust is, well, if I trust you, I'm already at the state of not knowing, right? Of being not complete. And then if I add the lend to it, Vertrauen geliehen, then so first of all, what's interesting here is German is very directional. It's not 100% clear if where they borrowed the trust from is from each other or from an external source. And I want you to keep that in mind, right? Because the way he says that is basically like, for who gave you that loan?
Wir haben versucht, auf der Schussfahrt zu wenden. Nichts war zu spät, aber vieles zu früh. Wir haben uns geschoben durch alle Zeiten.
Yeah. That works for you as on a level, right? This image of being shoved through all the tides, and you kind of get it, I suppose. But in German is it's a little bit more than that, I would say. So there would be synonyms he could have used, right, for tides. But there's a very special reason he used Gezeiten, right? So if I put Gezeiten in, then probably the translation is the same. I forgot the German keyboard on. Right? So that's correctly translated. The point is that this is a Germanic word, right? It doesn't come from the Romance stems, but so no Latin. This is purely Germanic. And do you know how when you know Native American languages are translated into English, and all of a sudden everything sounds a little bit bloomy, right? Like many moons ago. The concept here is similar, right? Where you basically say, okay, so what is this, for example, right? The this here, times, right? So Zeit, time. The way that tides are expressed with this word has more to do with a pre-calendar, pre-clock society than anything else, right? This was, as you can imagine, like for all different kinds of reasons, tracking of time and seasons and all of that has always been relevant. Far before we kind of like started to, you know, have calendars and all that jazz, you know, but something as reliable as low tide and high tide, and when that occurs, and how it relates to the moon and so on, like that was something that was understood way before that, and that was a measurement system also to track, you know, hours and or time in a broader sense, and Gezeiten in is kind of like a grandiose way. You remember this? We played with this game before, right? This is the exact same syllable that he used before to create those kind of things. And what he's basically saying is, as you can see, Zeit is one of the translations that it has, right? So it's actually like eras or epochs or periods, you know, like those kind of connotation. So what he's basically saying here is not only through up and down, but also through time, right? Through all the different sections of or years or whatever, you know, without naming a concrete measurement of time, but through all those different time periods that they had together. So interesting. So he creates stuff like that on multiple levels.
Haben uns verzerrt und verzweifelt geliebt.
Okay, so forget what I said about translation. This is simply wrong. So being sidetracked is not what he says here. Verzettelt is an image that you don't know in English. It actually it stems from like a piece of paper or note or something like that, but the meaning is closer to having gone down a wrong path, right, and having to face the consequences of wrong decisions or the series of events that you know. No, it's always self-inflicted, right? It's always self-inflicted. So it is more of being in a one-way street and realizing that there's nothing else to do but turn around. This is not sidetracked in the sense of like, okay, yeah, I was kind of like busy with something else. It was no, we went in the wrong direction.
Verzweifelt geliebt.
Okay, that will be hard to. So desperately is probably the right, right? Oh, this is going to be hard because this is exactly the issue. Yeah. So that's how it's translated. I would prefer this. Maybe this even. Hard to say. So here's the point, right? The again he uses this kind of like thing. So verzweifelt, zweifelt actually would be the actual word, is doubt. And fair is something in German that would basically move something like a preposition, right, to the side of it, right? So if I say something like fahren, actually let's do this. It's a good comparison. Fahren, right, drive, and then I say verfahren. Okay, lol. Okay, I actually have to write a sentence. Translates that correctly. Okay, interesting. Good. Yeah. So what it basically means, you know, like, okay, I did not drive, but I basically, right, or you know what, I have a better example, because this is just too funny. Okay, Rücken, move, right, and then if I say verrücken, you would see that in English that's the only thing you have, right? It's like, well, it's still a form of movement, obviously, right? And just to make you aware of why we see it differently, this is crazy. So if something is moved outside of the spectrum of normative, right, and then it's mad, insane, whatever, right? It's outside of normal. And so that the same goes with verzweifelt, right? So you have doubt, and then you're basically beyond doubt, and that is the how should I say it, how hard you're going for this hopeless endeavor, actually, right? So it's the desperation part comes in here, right? This is the to no avail, basically. It did not help. We loved each other, but are powerless, basically, to I don't know, greater powers maybe.
Wir haben die Wahrheit so gut es geht verloren.
Same thing, right? So what he said here is denied, right? And so denied is just a rejection, obviously, but verlogen really means we lie to ourselves, right? It's not that we didn't want to see it; we lie to ourselves.
Die Wahrheit so gut es geht verloren. So ein Stück vom Himmel, das es dich gibt. Du hast jeden Raum mit Sonne geflutet, hast jeden Verdruss ins Gegenteil verkehrt. No, there's no moment.
Okay, there's a lot in there. So this image works fine in English, obviously, right? So he uses a lot of Nordic expressions in his songs. You notice that when a lot of different songs, obviously, he has a lot of imagery, you know, from that's water related or sea related and all that kind of stuff. But flooded that obviously works. The imagery would work in English just as well. So there's no explanation required. Jeden Verdruss ins Gegenteil verkehrt. Okay, that is something that under no circumstances would a German use that in an actual sentence, spoken or probably written. Right? This is a very interesting way of expressing yourself. So let's go through it step by step.
Sonne geflutet, hast jeden Verdruss.
Okay. So Verdruss is basically, so again, we're talking about a state, right? A state of basically being, oh God, Verdruss is such a, what is even a good English word for that? Was annoyance, yeah. Okay. Okay, I just want to see. Disgruntled. Okay, that's the verb it does. Okay. And then discontent. Okay. Yeah, okay. You know what? Close enough. And so turned around, yeah, again on the first level, correct. But ins Gegenteil verkehrt. So what he basically says is you took it and created the opposite of it, right? That I hope that's clear. It's relatively close, but the problem is since Verdruss is something that is not really graspable in English, I have to give up on that one actually. That's okay, that's a little bit of a cultural thing that needs to be explained probably. So obviously you wonder what the hell is Nordic noble. Good question. So we normally have a concept of West and East, right? Also within Germany, right? Okay, the GDR and West Germany, you know, Cold War, all yada yada yada. But the actual cultural divide is North and South, right? So there would be the culturally Prussian part of Germany, and then there's, you know, the southern part. So that's actually the tradition that he basically wants to emphasize. So Nordic beauties are or beauties, but the expression carries the idea of being very controlled, right? Maybe closed up even, but definitely very close to this image of you know, hard shell, soft core kind of dichotomy. And that's what he's basically going for here, right? Nordic noble is a form of class and a form of virtue that is, well, very Prussian, right?
Deine sanftmütige Güte.
Also, what a sentence. Okay, your gentle goodness is how it's translated, okay? So what he says here, sanftmütig, right? So let's do just a half of it, and you see that's already gentle. See that? But that's not what he says. He says sanftmütig, mutig, right? Which, as you can see, still says just gentle, right? But it says more about your character than just sanft, right? So if I you know what, I'm gonna make something funny, right? This is as you can see, actually what this word consists of. So what is meant by that is not only is it gentle, but it's gentle beyond or with the motivation to maintain this gentleness, even if the situation would allow you to break out of it, right? So having the grace, if you want, so to maintain being gentle, even though the situation might call for something else, right? Goodness, oh God, never. Please tell me this is translated differently. It actually says goodness, okay. So Güte is, I like benevolence. Güte is an unnecessarily old expression for that, right? It is probably used as a reference to the pedestal he puts her on. So this is an attribute we would probably, you know, give to, or would use in context with, I don't know, Mother Mary, maybe. You know what I mean? Like the Güte or der gütige Herr, right? The benevolent Lord. You know, as reference to God. So it is an extremely strong word to express something like goodness, you know, which is just simply one of the regular people doing good things or being good in a greater sense of things. I mean, he uses a word that has weight that is normally, again, only attributed to, I mean, you can use it for, you know, like grandmothers, I guess, or so, right? I mean, you know, like people that are somewhat beyond the realm of the rest of us sinners, if you want so, right? That has a little bit of that kind of connotation in it.
Ein unbändiger Stolz. Das Leben ist nicht fair.
Okay, this is actually, I mean, not that this bothers me too much, but this is not what he says. It's not untamed, it's untamable, right? So it's stronger. It's unbändiger, not ungebändigter, but unbändiger.
Das Leben ist nicht fair. In Film getanzt in einem silbernen Raum. Mit einem goldenen Balkon. Die Unendlichkeit bestaunt.
Okay, this is actually just as it is written, right? So it's passive voice, right? Den Film getanzt. So the movie was danced, right? This is really as weird as it probably sounds. In einem silbernen Raum, in a silver room. I think you get that, you know, given that something like the silver screen would be an expression that you also use. He starts referencing classical work, in a certain sense. So keep this golden balcony in mind that he's singing about.
Den Film getanzt in einem silbernen Raum, mit einem goldenen Balkon, die Unendlichkeit bestaunt, heillos versunken.
This is such a beautiful way to express it in English that I almost don't want to ruin it for you, but that's not exactly what he says. Okay, I can't reach the head, but it's close enough. Yeah, okay. I mean, so the missing part here is basically that the importance of how we express it is in observing, right? Which is a little bit between the lines here, but okay.
Heillos versunken.
No, that's not helpless. That's not. I wouldn't translate it like that. So this is what he. Right. This is how the translation, what the translation says, but that's not what he says, right? If you listen closely.
Die Unendlichkeit bestaunt, heillos versunken.
So what he says is heillos, right? Heillos, which is hopeless, not helpless, and that's quite a difference. Now the interesting thing here is that hopeless is still a very, I mean, it's the closest translation that I can think of too, but the point is the I kind of like the translation unholy for a very different reason. So heil is something that you obviously know, right? So just to make it clear, this what you see here, that's the same as your less, right? So I basically say no without, right? So this, right, is salvation, good, well-being, right? You naturally know this from Heil Hitler, and which that's why it's rarely used as this. I mean, for some reason with Slava Ukraini it comes back, but I mean it's not used in German at least. This is basically, you know, more closer to what this means, right? This is this Heil, the you know, the salvation, the you know, the hail. I don't even know if that works in English, and to negate it is not to be hopeless, right? It just means it's without salvation. It's not, can't be saved, so to speak, right?
Trunken und alles war erlaubt, zusammen im Zeitraffer mit Sommernachtstraum.
I'm not gonna give you an interpretation here, but see if you can get the connection between the different imageries that are clear, right? So think back of the balcony and the silver screen and so on.
Du hast jeden Raum mit Sonne geflutet, hast jeden Verdruss ins Gegenteil verkehrt. Nur der Schnurr deiner sanftmütiger Güte, dein unbändiger Stolz. Das Leben ist nicht fair. Dein sicherer Gang.
Yeah, almost. So again, translation is perfectly fine. It's one of the levels of meaning that he's saying, but he did not say confident, right? He did not say that. He said sicher, which actually translates to secure. And so the way that you would probably say, like, you know, when you're hiking, like oh, watch your step, make sure that you know you're on secure footing or whatever, like in that context, right? And he references it with stride. So that's definitely one of the levels that he's talking about. That you know, like it's a the way that she's walking is it's not weak or anything. You know what I mean? There's strength in it. It's secure, how she steps and so on. But at the same level, like they're absolutely right. It refers to the connotation of confidence, which is definitely also something he wants to play with. Is that there was strength or justified confidence, let's say it like that, in the way he expresses, you know, those or merges those two images together, those two metaphors that he overlaps. He loves to do stuff like that.
Deine wahren Gedichte.
Okay, I don't necessarily have an issue with that translations, but just to be sure, it says poems, not poetry, right? Which small change, I guess, but still, I wonder why they did that. Okay, now English speakers have to help me at this one, okay? So, to the German listener, heitere Würde is a little bit, I don't want to say an antonym, it's not completely opposing, but it is, there's a contrast, right? So, perfectly translated, actually. But the point is, like, okay, so dignity in the German word for it carries a particular kind of seriousness. You know, that it's not necessarily as lighthearted as and nonchalant as you know, like somebody who is serene would be. You know, like dignity is serious, is class, is yeah, it's not lighthearted. You know what I mean? So combine those words together is more than putting an adjective to a noun. It is yeah, a little bit of an antonym, right? It feels like it is in contrast with each other. Yeah, you're lacking the words, so it is translated correctly. Just to, if you're interested, you know, so we have two different concepts in German for that kind of movement that would go along with shaking. Erschüttern is more something that would happen like when you have an earthquake, right? Und schütteln is more something that would, you know, you would shake your protein shake maybe. So different kinds of movements. So we distinguish between well, those forms of vibrations, if you want so. And what he uses here is more that earthquake scenario that I was talking about.
Du hast der Fühler deine Stern geboten.
What's particularly funny about this one is, sorry, this is a little bit of a private thing, is that before I actually saw one of those videos with those subtitles, obviously I never watched a video with subtitles before. And if I would probably use German, to be honest with you, but it's the first time because I wondered. I said, like, what are they saying here? This is not what he sings, because I always heard "Du hast der Führung," so the leadership or the higher ups. You know, you divide them. You know, and went you on path, which would be like, you know, speaking truth to power kind of concept. And then I listened to it again and actually noticed, like, no, they're right. I got it wrong. So what they're so what he's using is the word Fügung, which now if I write, and let's actually try this out. Now I don't think that this is even something that they can list. Sorry, my bad. What do I want to do here? Yes, sorry, I want to do it like this. It's not this. So as you can see, the Fügung is not even listed here. as one of the possibilities. So that's a pretty old, very uncommon word. Because it implies something that we nowadays don't really want to see that way, right? So Germany is a relatively, if not secular, at least science-friendly society. And something like Fügung implies a force and intent behind your personal destiny, right? So you know how when we use terms like destiny nowadays, what we basically mean is, well, you know, like it's almost like it's a right. You know what I mean? Like this is something that I was meant to achieve great things, kind of things, or it's my destiny to one day be a superstar. You know, like we use it in something conquerable, right? Something achievable, something that can be formed or changed, and all those kind of things. Fügung is not that word. Fügung is more the concept of, you know, the Greek mythology of where you would have, you know, the old ladies spinning your destiny together, and then, you know, eventually they that's how your life has to have, right? So very, very based on an external actor. It probably reveals a lot about his relationship with the concept of deity or the universe or whatever, right? Interesting. And then Stirn geboten is also, like, I have no issue with this translation, but simply not what he says, right? He uses an image that is, so Stirn is forehead, and that's an idiom that you might actually understand a little bit if you think about like something like when you say thick-headed or whatever, you know, like this kind of like stubbornness element that is in it. That's what he uses here.
Hast ihn nie verraten, deinen Plan vom Glück.
And now he does the opposite, right? So German is a very, very precise language, which does not mean that you cannot, you know, be as ambiguous as all get out.
Deinen Plan vom
One of those weird things that causes actually misunderstandings within the German-speaking crowd is that sometimes you don't really know how that word is used, right? So if I say something like Glück, this is the word to use, right? The first translation would be luck, not happiness, right? It depends on context, whether or not you mean luck or happiness. The concept is related in the German mind, right? That well, if you're lucky, that means that something caused you happiness that was unforeseeable, or at least was a chance, right? By chance, in English, those are two very, very separate concepts, right? That one is not necessarily does not necessarily have to bring the other, right? So I got lucky doesn't mean that I'm happy now, right? It just means that something went to my benefit, or could have gotten worse, right? let's say it like that. Could have gone worse. So and okay, this is a little bit of a detour here, maybe. But one of the interesting things about language is that you only have the concepts that you can think of, right? I would go as far as to say that if you don't have a word for something, it means you don't have a concept of it. You don't have a idea of what you're talking about. That's why in any kind of jargon, you have words that are not used by the broader public, because they don't need to have this kind of thought. Now, if you transport that on a different level, on the level of languages, then you would notice that, you know, whenever, you know, Americans make fun of things like, well, you know, Germans have a word for it, then the interesting thing is, and that's why it resonates, you know, when you find those weird internet phenomena, it's like, okay, Fernweh, you know, like the longing for the world, right, or to go away, or to see something, or they're hard to explain, but they're concepts that are emotional concepts that actually everybody should know, and everybody, if explained, recognizes that, yeah, that's an emotion that, you know, that we can have, that, yes, I know what you're talking about. Like Schadenfreude is, we all have that. It's just that, you know, for some reason we don't have, the English language never needed to have that word, because apparently there's no thought that was ever expressed. And that's why German is such an interesting language, and that's why certain languages produce more philosophy and science and all kinds of things than others. So when people speak about something like the beauty of the German language, they don't mean it sounds nice, right? We know that. So if something sounds nice, I mean, I love how Hawaiian sounds, for example. That's a beautiful, beautiful language from how it sounds. Like, I don't speak it, I can speak of it or about it, but I like how it sounds. When the beauty of German is the precision and the all the possibilities that it have to create thought and new thought, right? Basically rearrange elements to create something that hasn't existed before as a concept. Now with Glück, ironically, it's the opposite way around, right? It's something that, why don't Germans differentiate between luck and happiness? And dear Germans, that is something you should indeed think about. We're normally very, very, very precise in all kinds of little niche things, but for something as basic as happiness, look at how well you can express that. Anyway, so that's what he uses here.
Oh, Glück, ich gehe nicht weg, hab meine Frist verlängert. Neue
Yeah. So, I mean, it's clear from context that, okay, he still eventually needs to go, and that's what he also actually says. Meine Frist verlängert, right? So he pushed out his timeline, his deadline. He's not really staying. The emphasis is not on the stay. The emphasis is, okay, I'm not going away. I postponed leaving. Right? That's what he's actually saying. What is Frist, actually? That's a good question. How's that translated? What? Sorry. Deadline, yeah.
verlängert. Neue Zeitweise auf einer Welt. Habe dich sicher in meiner Seele. Ich trag dich bei mir, bis der Vorhang fällt. Ich trag dich bei mir, bis der Vorhang fällt.
Yeah, they used to call him the only German superstar because he could fill stadiums with German lyrics, which, believe it or not, is not very common in Germany, especially not when it comes to pop music, I would say. So there are a couple of niche people that are very popular, but for all kinds of reasons. But he's, I mean, consistently, right? I mean, for he had in the '80s, he had big hits and so on. Like it's a justified term to use for him. Anyway, so you kind of got that, obviously, with the falling curtain, that kind of theater imagery referring to, you know, the end of it all is kind of the same in the US or in English-speaking countries, and probably so normally if I were to go into interpretation, I would basically go into the, how that relates to all of the images that he picked up before. But I mean, I don't want to do that today because I want you to actually be able to create that yourself, think about it yourself if you're interested. Was nicely translated. There was one issue I had. Yeah. So time travel is correctly translated. However, again, right? So this space that you see between time and travel does not exist in what he says. That's one. He creates a concept that yes has the exact same sound as time travel, but he obviously is not speaking of moving, back and forth in time. What he's basically saying is embarking on a new journey through a new era of time. Right? That's what he's saying. So yes, he says Zeitreise, but again, he has this little inflection that makes it clear that yeah, it sounds like this, but I mean the other. Yeah. How he means this, I don't know, by the way. No idea. It's not connected to anything. He has, so grammatically, right? He has this weird thing. Is like so. Actually, let me just show you that.
Ist der Vorfeld, ich trag dich bei mir.
I would have not translated this in the future tense, even though it might as well be. Right? But the interesting thing about the way he expresses himself, this is not unusual, but like in music, you have a lot of liberties with how sentence structures work and so on, right? But he's not saying that, right? He's not actually putting anything that would have, this could also be in the now, right? This could also be like the present perfect, right? Or actually in that case, no, sorry, progressive, right? I am carrying you with me would basically be the same, grammatically the same as how he expresses it. It's unclear which time he references here.
Ist der Vorfeld, ich trag dich bei mir. Ist der Vorfeld.
Yeah. Okay, so there will be way much more to this, by the way. The what I was kind of trying to do here was actually a little bit, getting you interested, or at least make you understand that whenever you have this kind of thing where it's just like, oh, this anime is really weird how they express themselves, it's because you can only get close to actually translating something in the sense that it would encompass all the meaning and all the nuances and all the cultural implications and references, and you name it. And believe me, this was a very surface job that I provided here, because certain things are just, that would be endless. What kind of knowledge one must have to basically dare to start an interpretation. But what I wanted to basically show you is that if you have interests in that are outside of your cultural realm, right, and if you even, that's what's actually what irritated me almost, is right. So you saw people like crying, and it is a very emotional song, no doubt about it. But then again, I wonder, what if you have such an emotional response to something that where you only get like, I don't know, but maybe a good portion of it, from all the nuances, if it's ideal, right? But probably not even that. How much more would you have from it if that is meaningful to you? If you were to actually be able to dig into something. So, if I noticed that when learning languages, that having interest in those things, I mean, ideally, or the strongest indicator is always, falling in love with someone that speaks another language. But since that can't be forced, having interest like that and digging into certain things that where you see that there's more beauty behind the wheel, it's or maybe a good motivation, right? To dabble into something like that, instead of being happy with how somebody thought most of it could be presented to you in your language. Yeah, anyway, so again, this is not the regular content I'm having, so we're not going to give you any kind of subscribe and thing here. So what I want to do at the end is apologize for the necessity for an AC and therefore probably relatively low sound quality. I have a noise suppression on it, but I mean, I know what that does in the end, and it's not going to sound as good as you are probably used to by now. But yeah, but thanks for making it through anyway, and have a great rest of your day.